The clinking of crystal glasses rang faintly above the hushed conversations of Manhattan's wealthiest patrons. Le Bernardin was no ordinary restaurant. It was a temple of French cuisine, where even the silence between meals seemed expensive. The chandeliers glimmered like captured constellations, each table draped in flawless white linen, every plate carefully positioned with mathematical precision. Diners arrived in limousines, their outfits curated by designers whose names whispered luxury. In this carefully orchestrated world of perfection, André Santos moved silently, almost invisible, a shadow among shadows. For 3 years, André had worked here, serving tables tucked away in corners, where guests of lesser importance were seated. He knew every step of the choreography, how to place a fork with elegance, how to bow slightly without appearing subservient, how to smile politely while being ignored. He was the only black waiter in the restaurant, a fact that didn't escape his manager's constant reminders, though never spoken outright. Always disguised in subtle orders, in the way certain tables were better suited for other staff, in the way he was always asked to clean, polish, redo. Yet André endured because for him this was more than a job. It was training. It was observation. It was the stage on which he studied not just food service but human nature. That evening, the usual quiet hum of luxury dining was disrupted. At one of the central tables, an elderly woman, her hair silver and neatly coiled, clutched her menu with trembling hands. She spoke hurriedly in German, her words stumbling over themselves, her voice carrying the strain of panic. Across from her sat a dignified older man, equally concerned but powerless to help. The head waiter leaned in, his brow furrowing with impatience. "Madam, I do not understand," he said firmly in English. "Please choose something else. We cannot waste time." His tone was not cruel, but it carried the cold indifference of someone who believed he had better things to do. The woman tried again, her German more frantic now, her voice cracking. Around her, other diners began to glance over, curiosity growing. André was nearby, refilling water glasses. He froze, listening. The woman was speaking of a severe seafood allergy. Her words were desperate, pleading. He felt his chest tighten. A single mistake here could mean more than a ruined evening. It could mean a life in danger. He stepped forward before he could second-guess himself. "Entschuldigen Sie, gnädige Frau," André said softly, in fluent German. The woman looked up sharply, hope flickering in her eyes. "Bit Urselen Sie mir genau was Sie nicht essen können. Ich würde es sofort de Kusch erklären." The relief that washed over her was immediate. Her posture relaxed. Her words tumbled out in a flood of gratitude and explanation. André listened carefully, nodding, clarifying details, then turned to the kitchen staff. He explained everything with calm precision, pointing to safe alternatives on the menu that could be prepared without risk. The head waiter, watching from a distance, pressed his lips together. The impatience on his face had shifted into something darker, displeasure at being upstaged. But André ignored him. The woman, Frau Weber, touched André's hand with trembling fingers. Tears glistened at the corners of her eyes. "Sie haben mein Leben gerettet," she whispered. "You have saved my life." She left a $100 bill folded discreetly under her plate, her eyes never leaving André's as she whispered again, "Danke für Ihr gut und Intelligenz." But not everyone in the room was pleased. From across the hall, a tall man with a neatly trimmed gray mustache observed the scene with narrowed eyes. Mr. Morrison, the manager, had seen enough. He strode over, his shoes clicking sharply against the polished floor. His voice was low but filled with a growl of authority. "Santos, back to your section. Leave the important customers to staff who know what they're doing." André swallowed the sting of humiliation and nodded. "Yes, sir." What Morrison failed to notice was the woman in the corner. She was dining alone, dressed in clothing that was understated but carried the unmistakable cut of wealth. She had been watching everything. André's quiet intervention, his fluency, his composure under pressure. Catherine Wells sipped her wine slowly, her sharp eyes cataloguing every detail. She often dined alone in such places, not for the food, but for the study of people. That night, she had found something unexpected. André returned to his section, but the air around him felt heavier. He carried on with grace, placing plates, pouring wine, smiling politely. Yet he could feel Morrison's gaze on him, sharp and punishing. The message was clear: know your place. The next day, Morrison's subtle punishments began. Santos, clean table 3 again. The table gleamed already. Polish the glasses, every single one. André obeyed without protest. Again and again, Morrison found new ways to degrade him, each order more unnecessary than the last. Other waiters noticed. Carmen, a Latina who had been with the restaurant for nearly a decade, whispered when no one was near. "Pobrecito, he's making your life hell." David, an Asian American waiter with a degree in gastronomy, shook his head. "Last week he told me I looked too Asian for table 15. Said it ruined the French image." "He's doing the same to you now." André only smiled faintly, but inside something was changing. Each insult was no longer just pain, it was evidence. He began writing them down in a small notebook he kept hidden in the staff room. Date, time, word spoken, who was present. Not paranoia. Preparation. Morrison believed André's silence meant submission. He had no idea that every cruel word was being carefully preserved like ammunition. The following week, another incident unfolded. A Japanese couple struggled with the menu, their English faltering. Their hands moved nervously, gesturing at the dishes, their voices tinged with anxiety. The waiter assigned to them looked frustrated, shaking his head. André felt the familiar pull in his chest. He stepped forward gently, his voice soft. "Sumimasen nihongo jie dekimasu. O menu o tetsudaimasu ka. May I help you with the menu?" The couple's eyes widened with relief, and they nodded eagerly. André guided them through, clarifying their shellfish allergy, ensuring their choices were safe. Their gratitude was written on their faces. Then Morrison arrived. His voice sliced through the moment. "Santos, how many times do I have to repeat myself? Stay in your section." "They couldn't explain their allergies, sir," André answered evenly. "It could have been dangerous." "I don't care," Morrison snapped, loud enough for nearby diners to hear. "You're here to serve food, not to put on a language show. If you can't follow orders, you can find another job." The room fell silent. Diners looked up, uncomfortable, whispers starting. André lowered his gaze, but Catherine, sitting again at her quiet corner table, saw it. The fists clenched at his sides, not with rage, but with decision. That night, as André prepared to leave, Catherine intercepted him at the door. She spoke in German first, then switched effortlessly to English. "Mr. Santos, may we talk in private?" André blinked, surprised. "You speak German." "I speak 7 languages," Catherine said with a smile. "Just like you. And I think we should talk." André followed Catherine outside, still in his uniform, the night air of Manhattan wrapping around him like a chill reminder of reality. Taxis rushed past, headlights cutting through the dark. Catherine's driver held the car door open for her, but she gestured toward a quiet coffee shop across the street instead. Inside, the cafe was nearly empty, its yellow light warm against the city's cool hum. Catherine ordered tea. André asked for nothing, still unsure why he was there. She studied him across the table, her expression calm but piercing. "You know who I am?" she asked. André shook his head. "Catherine Wells," she said simply. "Wells International. Hospitality, real estate, investments in 15 countries. The name was familiar. Even André, who avoided the gossip of billionaires, had read about her in magazines. One of the wealthiest women in America, known for her sharp intelligence and ruthless efficiency. "I've been watching you," she continued. "Not in a strange way. I eat alone because I like to see how people behave when they think no one important is looking. And you, Mr. Santos, are very interesting." André shifted uneasily. "I was only doing my job." Catherine's lips curved in a half-smile. You were doing far more than that. You saved lives. You showed grace when insulted. You stayed professional in the face of cruelty. That is not only a job. That is leadership. Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Andre felt a flicker of something inside him. Hope, dangerous and fragile. With respect, Ms. Wells, Morrison doesn't see it that way. No, she agreed. He doesn't. But I do. And more importantly, I own him. Andre frowned. I don't understand. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. Le Bernardin is in trouble. The owners are selling. Quietly but selling. In 2 weeks, Wells International will own that restaurant. And when I do, Morrison will be finished. Andre's eyes widened. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't want to just replace him with another arrogant manager. I want someone who understands hospitality. Someone who has lived humiliation and still stood tall. Someone like you. The words struck Andre harder than any insult Morrison had ever thrown at him. A general manager of Le Bernardin. Sounded impossible. Catherine reached into her bag and slid a small object across the table. A recording device, sleek and discreet. Keep working. Keep doing what you do. Record him. Every insult, every abuse of power. In 2 weeks, we'll have evidence to not just fire him, but to bury him. And then you'll take his place. Andre stared at the device. It seemed impossibly small to hold the weight of such a promise. Why me? You don't even know me. Her eyes softened just slightly. Because I was once in your shoes. Not a waiter, but invisible. Dismissed. Someone gave me a chance, and I built an empire from it. Now I give chances to those who deserve them. The question is, will you take it? Andre's fingers closed around the recorder. It felt heavier than it looked, like destiny disguised as metal and wires. He nodded slowly. I'll do it. For the next 2 weeks, Andre lived 2 lives. By day, he was the obedient waiter, silent under Morrison's insults. By night, he became a quiet collector of truth. The recorder captured everything. Morrison's sneering voice calling him lucky to even have a job. His mocking of David's accent. His dismissal of Carmen's years of service. His contempt for customers he deemed unworthy. Andre felt rage rise with every recording, but he forced himself to remain calm. Catherine's words guided him. Patience, preparation, precision. One night, the tension came to a breaking point. Morrison had gathered the staff after hours. Listen up, he barked. The owners are worried about image. That means no mistakes. And I don't want customers thinking we're a cheap international food court. We are French, elegant, sophisticated. So keep your languages and accents to yourselves unless absolutely necessary. Got it. Andre recorded every word. The final test came sooner than expected. Catherine arranged a private dinner at Le Bernardin with a group of Japanese investors considering a partnership. It was Morrison's chance to impress, and he strutted about like a king. His voice loud, his laugh forced. Andre served quietly, keeping his head down, while Morrison bragged. This restaurant is a symbol of refinement, he told the investors. We only hire staff who fit the right image for our guests. Some people just don't belong in certain positions, if you understand my meaning. The investors shifted uncomfortably. Catherine's eyes flicked toward Andre, giving the signal. Andre's hands shook slightly as he reached into his pocket. The recorder was small, but when he set it on the table and pressed play, it roared like thunder. Morrison's own voice filled the elegant hall. These people should be grateful to have any job. They need to know their place. The words echoed off the crystal glasses, silencing the room. Diners turned in shock, whispers breaking like waves. Morrison's face drained of color. What is this? He demanded. Catherine stood slowly, her calm presence commanding the entire restaurant. This, she said evenly, is the truth. And the truth has no place in fine dining. Does it, Mr. Morrison? The investors murmured among themselves. their expressions a mix of disgust and disbelief. Catherine's voice cut through the air again. "Mr. Morrison, you are dismissed. Effective immediately. Le Bernardin is now under Wells International ownership. And your replacement is standing right here, Mr. Andre Santos." The room erupted. Applause thundered, surprising even Andre. Carmen clapped with tears streaming down her cheeks. David beamed. Guests nodded approvingly, some rising to shake Andre's hand. Morrison tried to protest, his words stumbling. "You can't, this is outrageous." But Catherine's driver appeared at the door, flanked by security. "Escort him out," she ordered. And just like that, Morrison's 20-year reign ended in humiliation, his voice still echoing from the recording as he was dragged from the room. Andre stood frozen, his heart pounding. He hadn't expected applause. He hadn't expected anything. Catherine touched his arm gently. "Welcome to your new life, Mr. Santos." The applause faded slowly, replaced by the hum of renewed conversation. But for Andre, the world seemed to blur. He stood there, a man still dressed in the black uniform of a waiter, suddenly crowned as leader of one of Manhattan's most prestigious restaurants. His hands trembled slightly at his sides, though he forced himself to steady them. He could not show weakness now, not when so many eyes, staff and patrons alike, were fixed on him. Catherine leaned in close, her voice low but firm. "Do not think of this as charity. You've earned this. Now prove me right." Then she left him standing in the center of the restaurant, a quiet smile on her face, as if she already knew what would come next. That night, long after the last guest had departed, Andre remained in the dining room. The chandeliers had been dimmed, the silence broken only by the soft hiss of the dishwashers in the kitchen. Carmen approached cautiously. "Andre," she whispered, switching to Spanish, her mother tongue. "Esto es real. Is this real?" Andre sank into one of the chairs, exhaustion and disbelief washing over him. "I don't know," he admitted. "It feels like a dream." David appeared beside her, his expression half astonishment, half joy. "A dream for you, maybe. But for us, for all of us, this is survival. This is justice." Their words lit a spark in him. He realized then that this was bigger than himself. It wasn't only his victory. It was theirs too. All the overlooked, the humiliated, the silenced voices in that kitchen and dining hall. The next morning, Andre arrived early, long before the others. He walked through the empty restaurant, running his fingers across the pristine linen, the polished cutlery, the gleaming glass. For years, this place had been a cage. Now it was a canvas. Catherine met him in the office upstairs. "First day," she said warmly. "How do you feel?" "Terrified," Andre confessed. "Good," she replied. "Fear means you understand the weight of this. But don't let it paralyze you. Use it." He nodded. "I want to make changes." Catherine leaned back, curious. "What kind of changes?" Andre thought of Carmen, always relegated to scrubbing tables. Of David, silenced for his accent. Of Isabella, the sommelier whose Italian lilt had been mocked until she stopped speaking at all. He thought of every worker Morrison had crushed under his arrogance. "I want this to be a place where talent is measured by excellence, not by image," Andre said firmly. "Where languages are celebrated, not hidden. Where respect is as important as the food on the plate." Catherine's eyes glimmered with approval. "Then build it. You have my full support." And so began Andre's transformation of Le Bernardin. The first weeks were chaos. Staff were unsure how to address him. Some still called him Andre, others Mr. Santos, their voices tinged with disbelief. But slowly, they began to see he was different from any manager they'd known. He listened. That was the first shock. At meetings, he asked questions. "What do you think?" He'd say to the dishwashers, to the servers, to the cooks. At first, silence answered him. Years of suppression had taught them their voices didn't matter. But Andre waited patiently, encouraging them. Little by little, they spoke. And when he implemented their suggestions, faster systems for clearing tables, better communication with the kitchen, more respect for allergies, the staff realized he meant it. Then came the cultural program. Andre invited staff to bring a dish from their heritage once a week, sharing it with the team. Carmen brought tamales from her grandmother's recipe. David prepared dumplings the way his mother had taught him. Isabella brought wine pairings from Sicily. The kitchen buzzed with excitement, laughter, and pride. Word spread quickly. Guests noticed the difference. Service felt warmer, more personal, as if the restaurant itself had been reborn. Critics who had grown tired of Le Bernardine's rigid atmosphere began writing glowing reviews again. A revolution in fine dining, one headline read. Excellence with humanity. But Andre didn't stop there. He created scholarships for young people from underprivileged backgrounds, offering them internships at the restaurant. He partnered with culinary schools abroad, inviting chefs to share their traditions. Under his leadership, Le Bernardine became not just a place to eat, but a cultural exchange, a celebration of diversity. 6 months after Morrison's downfall, Gastronomy Today published a cover story. Across the glossy front page was a photograph of Andre in an elegant suit, standing in the grand dining room. His posture confident but humble. The headline read, "From Waiter to Visionary. How Andre Santos Redefined Fine Dining." Andre kept a copy of that magazine in his office, not out of vanity, but as a reminder of the journey. He often thought of his mother's words, "One day you'll be on the other side of the table. And when that happens, remember what it's like to be down here." He had not forgotten. Carmen, once invisible, was now the dining room supervisor, her voice carrying authority she had long been denied. Isabella, once silenced, now ran the wine program, her accent no longer hidden but celebrated. David, who had been told he looked too Asian, now led the restaurant's cultural exchange program, traveling abroad to build partnerships. Each victory for them was a victory for Andre, proof that he had kept his promise. Morrison's name, meanwhile, had become a cautionary tale. The recordings of his downfall had gone viral, spreading across social media, replayed on news outlets, dissected in articles about workplace discrimination. No restaurant in New York would hire him. He had gone from feared authority to disgraced relic, a symbol of everything wrong with the old ways of fine dining. Andre never gloated. He didn't need to. His success was the only revenge required. One evening, long after the restaurant had closed, Andre sat alone in the dining hall. He gazed at the empty tables, imagining the countless stories they held, the proposals whispered over dessert, the business deals sealed with wine, the quiet moments of connection between strangers. He thought of himself 3 years ago, polishing glasses in the corner, invisible, dreaming of more. Now he was here, not because he had demanded power, but because he had earned respect. And that, he realized, was far more enduring. As he stood to leave, Catherine appeared in the doorway. "You've done well," she said softly. Andre smiled. "Thank you for believing in me." "I didn't believe in you," she corrected gently. "I recognized you. There's a difference." He considered her words, then nodded. "Then let me say this. I will never forget where I came from, or the people still stuck there." Catherine's smile widened. "Good. Because that's what will keep you great." The autumn wind swept down 51st Street, carrying with it the scent of roasted chestnuts from a street vendor and the distant hum of traffic. Inside Le Bernardine, golden light spilled across the dining room, reflecting off polished glasses and plates of artistry. The restaurant was alive, but the atmosphere was different now. Warmer, freer, less rigid than the cold perfection it had once embodied. Andre Santos stood at the entrance, adjusting his cufflinks as he welcomed a delegation of French diplomats. His French was fluid, his gestures impeccable, but more than that, his sincerity shone through. Guests no longer felt they were stepping into a shrine of arrogance. Instead, they felt like part of a global conversation, each meal a bridge between cultures. In the corner, Catherine Wells observed quietly, as always. Though she remained a partner, she allowed Andre to lead. She admired his balance. Authority without cruelty, ambition without arrogance. Where Morrison had built walls, Andre built doors. Yet beneath the triumph, Andre carried a private weight. He thought often of his mother, Rosa, who had sacrificed everything so he could climb this mountain. Her hands, scarred by years of cleaning offices, had guided him more than any textbook. One evening, after a particularly successful dinner service, he slipped into his office and wrote her a letter. "May, I've made it to the other side of the table, just like you said. But it's not enough. I don't want just to sit there. I want to rebuild the table itself. Stronger, wider, with room for everyone you told me the world ignored. I hope I've made you proud." He sealed the letter, not knowing when he'd find the courage to send it. Months passed, and Le Bernardin flourished. Critics hailed it as the new model for fine dining. Other restaurants began imitating André's cultural initiatives, desperate to capture the same energy. For the first time in decades, the culinary elite were forced to confront their blind spots, their prejudices. Diversity was no longer a marketing gimmick. It had become the benchmark of authenticity. But change never came without resistance. Whispers spread through old guard circles. Jealous rivals who sneered that André's success was nothing more than a political show, that he had been handed power by Catherine's charity. Invitations to certain exclusive culinary clubs failed to arrive. André noticed the patterns, but he didn't bend. One night, after service, David found him sitting in the darkened dining hall, staring at the tables as if lost in thought. "You hear what they say about you?" David asked gently. "I hear," André admitted. "They say I don't belong, that I was put here to fill a quota, that I'm not legitimate." David sat down across from him. "Do you believe them?" André shook his head slowly. "No, but sometimes. Sometimes I remember the boy in the library, studying with second-hand books, too tired to keep his eyes open. And I wonder if he'd believe this future." David leaned forward. "That boy earned this future. And if anyone doubts it, let them come here and see for themselves." André smiled faintly. "Thank you." It was in those quiet moments, more than the glamorous galas or magazine covers, that André found his strength, not in proving himself to the world, but in remembering why he had fought so hard. Not for power, but for dignity. The turning point came when the United Nations Hospitality Committee invited him to oversee the official dinner for their annual assembly. It was a task reserved for the most trusted figures in global dining, a symbol not just of skill but of diplomacy. The evening arrived. Diplomats from every corner of the globe filled the banquet hall. André stood at the head of the team, coordinating service in 6 different languages, moving seamlessly between cultures. When a miscommunication nearly derailed a delicate dietary request from a Middle Eastern delegation, André himself stepped forward, speaking in flawless Arabic, diffusing the tension with grace. By the end of the night, the Secretary General shook his hand. "Mr. Santos, tonight you reminded us that food is not just nourishment. It is peace, it is culture, it is respect." The words struck deep. André realized then that his journey had surpassed his own ambitions. He wasn't simply rewriting his story. He was rewriting the language of hospitality itself. Back in New York, Le Bernardin thrived as never before. Carmen managed the dining room with authority and heart. Isabella's wine program won international awards, and David's cultural exchange expanded into partnerships across Europe and Asia. Guests left not just satisfied, but transformed, speaking of the restaurant as an experience that touched both palate and soul. Meanwhile, Morrison's fate unraveled further. He tried to reinvent himself, begging for opportunities in smaller establishments, posting desperate pleas on professional networks. But the internet never forgets. His name had become shorthand for prejudice in fine dining. When a tabloid published photos of him working as a night shift cashier in a suburban grocery store, the irony wasn't lost on anyone. He had once scorned André for being just another waiter. Now he couldn't even step back into the industry he had ruled with cruelty. Andre never mentioned Morrison publicly. He didn't need to. The silence itself was a kind of justice. One late evening, after a long service, Andre walked alone to the quiet corner table where Catherine always used to sit. She wasn't there that night. She was abroad, closing another deal, but he felt her presence anyway. He poured himself a glass of wine and let his eyes wander across the room. Every detail told a story. The servers chatting softly in Spanish and Italian. The chefs laughing in the kitchen, no longer afraid of the man who used to berate them. Guests from a dozen nations dining together, their conversations weaving a tapestry of languages. This was his legacy. Not the title of manager, not the wealth or recognition, but the culture he had created. One that would outlast him. He thought again of his mother. He could almost hear her voice. One day you'll be on the other side of the table. And when that happens, don't forget the people still sitting on the floor. He raised his glass, whispering softly in Portuguese. Para você, May. For you, mother. The restaurant doors opened just then, and Frau Weber, the German woman whose allergy had once set everything in motion, entered with her husband. They spotted him immediately, and she smiled warmly, waving. Andre crossed the room, embracing her like an old friend. My dear Andre, she said in German, her eyes misting. I knew you were destined for greatness the moment you saved me. You didn't just save my life. You gave it meaning again. And look at you now. Andre laughed softly, humbled. No, Frau Weber. You gave me a chance to prove myself. Without you, none of this would have begun. As he returned to his place, the weight of his journey settled into him, not as a burden but as a crown. He had faced humiliation, injustice, and doubt, but he had turned them into fuel, into purpose. True revenge, he realized, had never been about destroying Morrison. It was about building something Morrison could never even imagine. And Andre had done just that. The chandeliers above seemed to shine brighter that night, casting their golden light on the tables below. Tables that no longer divided but united. Tables that had been rebuilt, not by privilege or arrogance, but by resilience, vision, and the unshakable dignity of a man who refused to stay invisible. Andre Santos had not only crossed to the other side of the table. He had redrawn its very shape, ensuring there was space for everyone. And in doing so, he had proven a truth that would echo far beyond those walls, that excellence has no color, no class, no limits, only the courage to keep rising when the world tries to hold you down.